My wife cheated with our landlord and stole $250, $0 from me, then manipulated our divorce to hide her affair and claim she's entitled to half our house and savings. Now I'm fighting in court to prove her lies. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how I found out my wife, Jessica, was cheating on me with our landlord, of all people. It's the kind of betrayal that hits you like a freight train, and honestly, I still can't believe I didn't see the signs earlier. We'd been together for almost 10 years, married for 5, and I thought everything was fine, until I started noticing little things that didn't add up. But what really broke me open was discovering just how deep her lies went, and the amount of money she stole from me right under my nose. It all started about 6 months ago. Jessica had become increasingly distant, snapping at me over small things, avoiding conversations about the future, and constantly working late. I chalked it up to stress at her job, which, by the way, she'd always hated but kept pretending was her dream career. She'd come home with a new designer purse or some fancy clothes, but she'd insist she was just treating herself after a rough week. I never suspected a thing until I started noticing money disappearing from our joint account. At first, it was small $200 here, $300 there. I thought maybe she was just spending a little more than usual. But then I saw larger withdrawals, $10, $0, $15, $0, all under the guise of business expenses or investment opportunities. She never once showed me. I asked her about it and she'd wave me off, saying I was paranoid that I didn't understand how business worked. She smiled that smug, manipulative smile and tell me I was overreacting. Honestly, I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't shake this gnawing feeling that something was seriously wrong. Then came the day I found her phone. I'd never gone snooping before, but she left it on the kitchen counter unlocked, something she'd never do if she knew I was looking. I saw a string of messages between her and someone named, which was her landlord's name. At first, I thought maybe it was just friendly landlord-tenant talk. But then I saw the texts escalate from casual chat to flirtatious messages, talking about spending time together, secret meetings, and even plans to go away somewhere just the two of them. My stomach dropped. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I didn't confront her right away. I needed to be sure, so I started digging. I checked her emails, her social media, even her bank statements. And what I found was worse than I expected. Jessica had been secretly meeting our landlord for months. They'd been sleeping together, and she'd lied about where she was going when she left the house. I found receipts for hotel stays, lingerie she bought for him, and even a few explicit photos she'd sent him, claiming she was bored and needed excitement. I felt sick. All those years I thought she was loyal, faithful. Turns out, she'd been betraying me right under my nose, and with someone who was supposed to be just a landlord. What made it worse was how she manipulated the entire situation. When I confronted her, she everything at first, then got angry, calling me paranoid, insecure, and jealous for no reason. She spun stories about how I was just a good friend helping her with some work stress, and how I was just overreacting because I was insecure. But her tone was different when she thought I wasn't looking. She'd smirk, her eyes cold and calculating. I realized she'd been lying to me for months, maybe longer. She stolen thousands of dollars, and now I was staring at the wreckage of what I thought was my life. The emotional impact hit me hard. I went from feeling numb to furious, then deeply betrayed. I felt like a fool. How could I have missed all the signs? How could I have trusted her after everything? The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial. She drained our savings, stolen $250,000 in total, and now she was trying to manipulate the divorce to keep everything, claiming she deserved half of our house and all our savings, even though she'd lied, cheated, and stolen from me. The thought of losing everything, my home, my savings, my dignity, was overwhelming. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just let her walk away with my money, my house, and her lies intact. I started gathering evidence, recordings of her calls, bank statements, emails, everything I could find. I also reached out to a lawyer to understand my rights, because I knew she'd try to manipulate the court. She's a bitchy, manipulative woman who always got her way with her lies, but I was done being the fool. I needed to fight back, not just for my money but for my dignity and whatever shred of respect I had left for myself. That's where I am now, trying to piece my life back together after discovering she'd been screwing my landlord, stealing hundreds of thousands, and lying her way through our marriage. It's a mess, and honestly I don't know how this is going to end, but I do know one thing. I'm not going down without a fight. After I found out everything, I felt like I was walking around in a fog. My mind was racing, trying to process all the betrayal, the lies, the money gone 250 just vanished like that. Jessica's lies kept piling up, and each new revelation made me more furious. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind for so long. She'd always been the perfect wife on the surface, but underneath, she was just a manipulative, selfish liar. And the landlord who was supposed to be helping us with the house. He was just another piece of her game. I remember sitting in my office, staring at the bank statements, trying to figure out where the money went. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. I found transfers to offshore accounts, cash withdrawals at shady places, and even some payments made to Jessica's friends for services I didn't want to understand. The more I looked, the more I realized she'd been planning this for months. All the late nights, the secret meetings, the texts, she'd been building her lie, her new life, while I was at work, clueless. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time I wanted to catch her in the act. I set up a hidden camera in the living room, hoping to catch her talking to or anyone else. I also started recording our phone calls, just in case she tried to deny everything again. I wanted hard proof. The night I played back the recordings, I felt sick. There she was, her voice seductive, her words dripping with lies. She was planning to move out, keep the house, and take the money she'd stolen. I couldn't believe how cold she'd become. It was like she'd become a different person entirely. When I finally sat her down to talk, she just looked at me with that bitchy smirk, acting like I was the crazy one. She told me I was overreacting, that she loved me, and that I was just jealous because she was more successful than I ever was. She threw in some tears, trying to manipulate me into feeling sorry for her, but I wasn't buying it. I'd seen enough. I told her I had all the proof, her messages, the bank records, the recordings, and that I was going to take her to court. Her face twisted in anger and she started yelling, calling me paranoid and insecure. She said I was ruining her life, but honestly I felt like she'd already ruined ours. That night I felt a mix of rage, sadness, and helplessness. I'd been with Jessica through thick and thin, and now I was staring at the wreckage of what we'd built. The betrayal cut deep. She, stolen from me, lied to me, and then tried to manipulate the court to get half of everything I worked for. Our house, our savings, gone. All because she wanted to have some affair with the landlord, who was supposed to be just a guy fixing the leaky faucet. Instead, he was her secret lover, and she was planning to run away with him, leaving me to pick up the pieces. I knew I couldn't just let her walk away with everything. I had to fight back, not just for the money, but for my dignity. I started talking to lawyers the next day. I wanted to know my rights, how to prove her lies, and how to get back what was mine. The lawyer told me to gather every piece of evidence I could find, bank statements, messages, recordings, and to be ready for a long fight. I also contacted a private investigator to see if I could find more proof of her affair and her financial fraud. I was determined to expose her lies and make sure she didn't get away with it. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about justice. Jessica had manipulated me into thinking she was my wife, my partner, but she was just a con artist in disguise. Every day since I discovered her, betrayal has been a anger, sadness, determination. I've been replaying everything in my head, trying to understand how I got here and how I can rebuild my life. But one thing's clear: I won't let her take everything I've worked for. Not without a fight. The more I dug into her financials, the more I uncovered how deeply Jessica had been scheming. It wasn't just the affair with or the stolen money, although those were enough to make me sick. She'd been manipulating our entire life together, lying about her income, hiding assets, and even trying to set up a separate bank account in her name alone. I found out she'd been funneling money into that account for months, planning her escape route long before I even suspected anything. I remember sitting in my living room, staring at the pile of documents I'd gathered, bank statements, emails, texts, receipts, and feeling a mixture of rage and despair. She'd been spending the stolen money on luxury trips, designer clothes, Botox, and even paying off her credit cards. Meanwhile, I was working my ass off, trying to keep everything afloat. The house, our savings, the life we'd built. She was draining it all, and then I felt like I'd been punched in the chest every time I saw another shady transaction. I knew I had to act quickly. I reached out to a lawyer, a woman named who specialized in divorce and financial fraud cases. I explained everything, her affair, the theft, her manipulations, and she told me I had a strong case, but I had to be prepared for a fight. Jessica was the kind of person who'd lie her way out of anything, so I needed solid evidence. I started recording everything, her calls, her meetings, her secret conversations with. I even hired the private investigator I mentioned earlier to follow her, just to see if I could catch her in the act again. One morning I received a call from the PI. They followed Jessica to a hotel downtown. She invited there, and they were clearly more than just landlord and tenant. The footage was damning. Jessica was in bed with him, and she looked happier than I'd seen her in months. That was the moment I knew I couldn't hold back anymore. I had to confront her face to face, and I had to do it now. That afternoon, I came home early from work. Jessica was in the kitchen pretending to be surprised to see me. Her smile was tight, her eyes darting around. I laid out the evidence, showed her the recordings, the bank statements, the hotel receipts. Her face went pale for a second, then she started to spin her usual lies. She told me I was crazy, that I was paranoid, that I was just jealous. She said was just helping her with some business, and that I was overreacting because I was insecure. But I wasn't buying her bullshit anymore. I told her I had enough, that I knew everything about her affair, the theft, the lies. I told her she was done, and that I was filing for divorce. That's when she got really bitchy, started calling me names, saying I was a terrible husband, that I didn't appreciate her, that I was just jealous because she had everything I didn't. She even claimed I was controlling her, which was the biggest laugh I'd ever had. The truth was, she was controlling the entire situation, her lies, her money, her affair. After that confrontation, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with anger. I finally had proof, and I was done being manipulated. I told her she could pack her bags and leave. I wanted her gone, not just from the house, but from my life. I knew it wasn't going to be easy to fight her in court, especially since she was trying to claim half of everything, including the house and our savings, but I was ready. I wasn't going down without a fight. I had the evidence, the legal backing, and the resolve to make sure she paid for her lies and her betrayal. The emotional kept spinning. I'd gone from feeling numb to furious, to heartbroken, and now to determined. I couldn't believe how much I'd trusted her, how she'd used that trust against me. But I also realized I'd been blind for too long, and now I had to face the consequences of her actions. I was angry, yes, but I also knew I needed to stay focused if I wanted to come out of this with some shred of dignity intact. Jessica had pushed me to the edge, but I refused to let her win. I was going to fight for what was mine, and I was going to expose her for the manipulative liar she truly was. The days that followed that confrontation felt like a blur. Jessica, of course, went into full damage control mode. She started calling friends, her family, anyone she thought could help her spin the story. She told them I was abusive, paranoid, and that she was the victim. I could hear her crying on the phone, her voice trembling with fake tears, trying to paint herself as the innocent wife betrayed by her jealous husband. It was disgusting. She even tried to turn our friends against me, claiming I was trying to ruin her reputation because I was jealous of her success. Meanwhile, I kept gathering evidence. I hired a forensic accountant to dig deeper into her financial records. I wanted to see exactly how much she'd stolen, where it went, and whether she'd hidden any other assets. The accountant discovered a series of shell companies she'd set up, funneling money into accounts she alone controlled. It was clear she'd been planning her escape for months, maybe even longer. She lied about her income, claiming she was earning a modest salary, But the truth was she'd been living a double life, draining our joint savings and hiding her assets. I also reached out to the court, filing for an emergency hearing. I wanted to freeze her accounts, stop her from selling the house, and get a temporary order to prevent her from disposing of any more assets. The judge granted the request, which bought me some time. But I knew the real battle was just beginning. Jessica was a master manipulator, and I was fully aware she'd tried to twist everything in her favor during the divorce proceedings. In the meantime, I started talking to my friends and family, trying to process the shock and betrayal. Most of them were angry for me, some even furious at Jessica. One of my friends, Mike, told me to be prepared for her to play the victim and to stay calm. "Don't let her get under your skin," he said. "She's good at manipulating, but you've got the proof now. Stick to your guns." That advice helped me stay focused. I knew Jessica's game: lie, manipulate, and twist the truth until she got what she wanted. But I also knew I had the evidence to fight her every step of the way. One afternoon, Jessica showed up at my office unexpectedly. She looked desperate, almost frantic. She begged me to drop the case to settle out of court. She told me she'd change, that she'd stop seeing, that she'd give me back the money. She even cried in front of me, claiming she was sorry, that she loved me and didn't want to lose everything. I looked at her and felt a wave of disgust. That's when I realized her tears weren't genuine. They were just another manipulation tactic. She was trying to guilt-trip me into giving her what she wanted. I told her I wasn't interested in any of that. I laid out my terms clearly. She had to give back every penny she stole, she had to sign away any claim to the house, and she had to agree to a divorce that would cut her out of my life completely. I knew it was a tall order, but I also knew I had the upper hand now. The evidence was solid, and the court was on my side. Jessica's face twisted in anger and frustration, and she stormed out, screaming that I was ruining her life. Honestly, I didn't care. I'd already lost so much: my trust, my peace of mind. But I wasn't going to let her take everything else with her. That night I stayed up late, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I'd been blind for too long, trusting her blindly. Now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. Jessica was a liar, a thief, and a manipulator. She lied to everyone: our friends, her family, even me. And she tried to steal my future along with the money. I made a decision then. I was going to fight her in court, no matter how long it took. I was going to prove her lies, expose her affair, and get back what she'd stolen. I wasn't going to let her walk away with a dime more than what she deserved. Nothing. The emotional pain was still there, but I refused to let it define me. I'd been betrayed in the worst way, but I was determined to come out of this stronger. I wanted her to pay for what she did, not just financially, but for destroying the trust we once had. This was just the beginning of a long war, and I was ready for it. The court dates started coming faster than I expected. Jessica tried every trick in the book to delay, to spin her lies, and to manipulate the system. She hired her own lawyer, a slick guy who seemed more interested in protecting her reputation than actually fighting for justice. She presented herself as the victim, someone who had been wronged, who was just trying to find happiness after a difficult marriage. She claimed I was abusive, jealous, and that she deserved half the house because she contributed to our life together. That was her big lie, that somehow her betrayal was justified because she put in years of work as a wife. But I had the evidence, and I made sure everyone knew it. I brought in the recordings, the bank statements, the receipts, everything. I even had the private investigator testify, showing her secret meetings with, the hotel stays, the explicit photos, the texts. It was brutal but necessary. I watched her try to spin her web of lies, and I stayed calm, letting the evidence speak for itself. One of the most shocking moments came during a hearing when her lawyer tried to argue that she was entitled to half the house because she contributed emotionally and that I was an unfit provider. I couldn't believe how absurd it sounded. I'd worked my ass off for that house, paying the mortgage, maintaining it, and saving for our future. Jessica hadn't contributed anything of value lately. She'd been siphoning money, lying, cheating, and manipulating me. The judge saw right through her, though. He ordered her to produce all her financial documents, and when she couldn't, her case started to fall apart. Meanwhile, I was busy preparing my own legal filings. I filed for full custody of our joint assets, demanded repayment of the stolen money, and insisted on a court order to freeze her accounts until everything was sorted out. I knew Jessica would try to fight dirty, so I made sure I had everything documented. I also hired a forensic accountant who uncovered even more hidden accounts and shell companies. It was clear she'd been planning her getaway for months, maybe even years. The most intense moment came during the final hearing when Jessica's lawyer tried to claim that she deserved half of everything because she'd made sacrifices in the marriage. The judge, however, didn't buy her lies. He looked at the evidence and said, "The court finds that Ms. Jessica engaged in fraudulent activities, including theft and deception, which void any claim she might have had to marital assets." The courtroom was tense, but I felt a wave of relief. Justice was starting to feel like it was on my side. Jessica's face was a mix of fury and shock. She realized her lies weren't working anymore. She'd been exposed as a manipulative, money-hungry liar. Her attempt to manipulate the court backfired spectacularly. She yelled, called me every name in the book, but it was all noise. I knew I'd won a crucial battle, but the war was far from over. The judge scheduled another hearing to settle the final division of assets and to determine the custody arrangements. I was prepared for whatever came next. Throughout this process, I kept reflecting on how deeply I'd been betrayed, not just by Jessica, but also by my own trust. I'd been believing in her, thinking we had a future, but her actions proved she was just a master manipulator. I learned a hard lesson. Never ignore the signs, never assume someone's loyalty is unconditional. The betrayal was so complete that I felt like I'd lost a part of myself, but I also learned that I was stronger than I thought. I had the evidence, the support, and the legal backing to fight for what was rightfully mine. Now, I'm just waiting for the final ruling. I want her out of my life completely. I want to rebuild what I can, start fresh, and leave the past behind. The pain still lingers, but I refuse to let it define me. Jessica's betrayal cost me a lot: money, trust, stability. But it also taught me how important it is to be vigilant, to protect myself, and to never let anyone manipulate or cheat me again. I hope sharing this helps someone else see the warning signs or find the strength to fight back when it feels like everything's falling apart. Because if I've learned anything, it's that no matter how deep the betrayal, there's always a way out, if you're willing to fight for it. Now that the final court ruling is in, I feel a strange mix of relief and emptiness. Jessica has been ordered to pay back every cent she stole, and she lost her claim to the house. The judge made it clear that her fraudulent activities, lies, and betrayal had zero weight in the asset division. I finally got what was legally mine, but I can't say I feel victorious. It's hard to find joy in a victory that came at such a high cost: trust, years of my life, my sense of security. Jessica's gone, and I've moved out of the house. I sold it to cover some of her debts, and I've started over with a new place. It's not easy. There are nights when I lie awake, replaying everything, wondering if I missed signs, if I could done something differently. But I know the truth now, that I was blind to her manipulations, that I trusted someone who didn't deserve it. Still, I've learned a lot from this nightmare. First, never ignore your instincts. I saw the signs but dismissed them because I wanted to believe the best in her. Second, keep meticulous records. The evidence I collected was what ultimately exposed her lies and protected me in court. Third, don't be afraid to fight. No matter how manipulative someone might be, the truth and evidence can set you free. And finally, rebuild trust takes time, but it's possible. I'm slowly working on trusting again, but I know now to be cautious. Looking back, I realize how much this experience has changed me. I'm more guarded, more aware of the warning signs, but I'm also stronger. Jessica's betrayal was a brutal lesson, but it forced me to face reality and stand up for myself. I don't regret fighting for what's rightfully mine, even if it hurt like hell. It's made me realize that no one is entitled to your life, your money, or your trust unless they earn it. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this: Don't let betrayal define you. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it's devastating. But you have the power to pick up the pieces and rebuild. Be vigilant, protect what's yours, and never be afraid to fight for justice, even if it means exposing someone you once loved. Because in the end, honesty and integrity matter most, and they're worth fighting for.